like we were talking about the Paris E-Prix, and obviously you went there and you sat through the 8-degree race and the hailstorm and the rainstorm. But tell us a bit about the atmosphere of Paris. I mean, can you feel it from actually sitting in the stand?
Well, yes and no, because where the stands were, you were in front of shops, at least on the main street, so it really didn't feel as Parisian as if you'd have been stood in front of, I think there was like an armory museum or something near the pit lane exit. That felt a lot more Parisian and just a lot more sophisticated, but I think it was such a electric atmosphere, for lack of a better term. There was just so much on, and walking through Léon Valide and being able to see the Eiffel Tower from the circuit. It's a really nice area, and it's a really brilliant place for them to have put the circuit.
And would you say that that really underlines how Formula E needs to stay in cities?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think if we go back to something like Rome, I think that it's nice to think that it's sort of in a central part of a beautiful country, but it wasn't as beautiful to look at as somewhere like Paris is.
I mean, when it comes to the race, obviously there was plenty of action, but could you see the action easily from your vantage point? And where actually was your vantage point?
So we were in the 5th grandstand on the main straight, so we were probably only 75 metres away from the actual start-finish line. There was plenty of screens up everywhere. There was 5-6 screens down the main straight, and from where I was, you could only see sort of 250 metres of the straight. But it was still a nice little vantage point. You got to see the drivers go off at the start of the race, which unfortunately wasn't a standing start; it was a safety car start. So that was a slight disappointment, and obviously you didn't get to see the excitement of a normal Formula E start. But you got to see the drivers come across the line at the end, and it was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it certainly looked great from TV as well. But I mean, what about the access to all of the entertainments as well? I mean, obviously the E-Village and or as some people call it, the Not Paddock, has plenty of things to do. Did you get a chance to enjoy those?
Yeah, I did. There's plenty of time between the I-Pace races and the Formula E sessions to go and have a look around. It was absolutely packed every single time. There was, people handing out flags, or there's like competitions, there's the simulators, there was, you could go into the almost not hospitality, but like hospitality style areas of the different teams and things, and you could get a good look at, the cars and have a chat to like team representatives and things, and there was always something to do. You were never going to be bored while you were there.
Yeah. What was your favourite part of the weekend? Did you have any particular memory that you would take home?
Ooh, I don't think I could pick one particular thing. I just think the whole atmosphere, and it was my first Formula E race. I'd done testing a few years ago, but I'd never actually attended a race, so I think just the whole atmosphere, the whole experience it's really nice. It'll stay with me for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to Berlin for the next E-Prix, so I'm looking for tips myself. I mean, if we assume, because press accreditation is taking a while to get back to me, that I will be going as a fan. As a fan, what do you recommend somebody does first when they enter the circuit?
I'd say just wander around a little bit, just walk around, take it all in, find where everything is. If you have grandstand seats, find where your grandstand is. Just take a little walk around, see where everything is, and then you can always go back and look at things in more detail a little bit later on.
And is it worth staying within the boundaries of the circuit for the entire race? I mean, presumably there is enough to do to stick around for the whole of practice and qualifying, and then the support races, etc.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because even when there's the breaks between sessions, there's always something going on in the village or somewhere around the circuit. There'll be something to look at. So really, there is no point in sort of wandering off and then coming back later.
Saying that, you did have some issues with the organisation of the Prix, and I mean, obviously we're both fans of Formula E, we both want it to be successful, but, you know, a bit of constructive criticism is well worth it. So what would you say they could do better?
Well, just as a small bit of backstory, because I think what I'm going to say probably won't make much sense. When we were in the village, it was probably about 40 minutes until the race started, and we sort of decided to go back over to our grandstand, get settled back in, just sort of prepare for the race. And the bridges to get across the circuit, which are kind of a bit precarious at the best of times, they'd been closed without warning. No one had been told they were closed. So the staff were not talking to anyone in English. Even if you asked for English translation, no one would give you anything in a language that you could understand. And really the staff were telling you the race was cancelled, not that you had to walk around to the entrance and come back in. And generally I think it's not Formula E's fault. I think it's the staff that they employed more than it is the organisers. But really, the staff were quite pushy. They were quite rude. They were overly aggressive as well towards anyone. It didn't matter who you were; they would be quite pushy with you. When we went back into the circuit, there were no organised queues. It was probably close to 100, 120 people crowding to get into an entrance, and that was not a nice situation to be in. It was absolutely horrible. It was so claustrophobic, and people were pushing and shoving just to get back into the circuit. Then when you go in, you have to be bag and body searched, that's absolutely fair enough. I completely understand that. But when you are being pushed towards 3 male body searchers, then being shouted at in French for not going to a female, it's just not a very nice experience. And I wanted the full fan experience while I was there, so I was going to go to the driver's signing, and it was announced very late. You had to have read somewhere online that it was going to be on. There was only a warning that it was taking part about 30 minutes beforehand, so I decided to go find it. They didn't specifically say where it was. Found it, went to get in the back of the queue, and I was almost physically pushed by a staff member out of it instead of being told that the queue was full. So I think maybe more training on the staff's end of things, because I like I said, I do think it is the staff more than it is Formula E's organisers. But this isn't the first time I've heard of something like this happening at Paris. I've heard of it happen at other E-Prix as well, so I think it could just be down to the staff more than anything. But there definitely does need to be something done about it, because if it was my first experience at Formula E and I wasn't, working within the series, I'd probably look at it and never want to come back, just because of the experience that I had in sort of the last 2 hours I was there.
I mean, certainly some of the things you said sound a bit alarming, particularly, obviously, you're a young person, but you can handle yourself, but still being pushed around or being, if you like, jostled by male members of staff, it doesn't sound particularly great however you look at it. I mean, if we look at something which has been routinely, praised for crowd control, like the London 2012 Olympics, one of the things they did there was employ young volunteers to stand around, major crowd areas and, just be there to have conversations with spectators to explain things. So rather than being asked to, direct the traffic, they were just there to explain what was happening. Do you think maybe a few volunteers could have been good on the Formula E side as well?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, they had younger volunteers at the entrances just to guide you if you were lost, and there was a few inside as well doing like surveys just to see, how you're enjoying the E-Prix, how you got there, etc. But I think that the staff felt so intimidating that you couldn't even talk to them to ask for directions or anything, or to ask for information on things going on that day. So I think younger staff members that are purely there for information purposes and things like that would have been very helpful.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the other thing is, Formula E has been going for 5 seasons now, so presumably the amount of interest has built up, particularly this season as we've got Massa and Van Dorn and the new cars. Do you think maybe there is an extent of, or there is a certain amount of Formula E and maybe the race organisers, the regional organisers, not actually understanding how much interest there would be this season?
That could definitely be one reason. Yeah, I think it's been an issue since Paris was first added onto the calendar. So I feel like a few seasons on, something should have been sorted out by now. Right.
But would you still go back to Paris for another Formula E race, or would you instead look for another place on the calendar for your next visit?
I would definitely go back, but purely for the atmosphere rather than to have a full fan experience. But I would, if I wasn't working within the series, probably look more towards something like Berlin or Bern or even Monaco, just for a bit of a different experience.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really looking forward to going to Berlin. I think whether I'm there as a fan or a quote unquote journalist, it'll be interesting to actually get to an E-Prix and be able to produce some content on the scene, because doing this in the front room, I know it's what most fan sites do, but it does rather isolate you from the action. So it'll just be great to see things going past and be able to hopefully describe the speed to people.
Yeah, I agree. I think being actually at a race event feels so much different to almost like being sort of more of an armchair journalist, if that makes sense. It's such a different environment, and obviously I haven't got masses of experience of working at races because I'm still too young to work at most places. But when you do eventually get accreditation for somewhere and you actually get to talk to the drivers and see firsthand their emotions and actually get a good look at everything from an inside perspective, it in a good way changes your view on motorsport, and it feels so much better than doing it from home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got loads of ideas as to what to do in terms of what to put together for the Berlin weekend. I thought maybe about doing this podcast as a kind of as live podcast with. I think Peter is going to be there, and obviously if we can get Hazel and she's not too busy, then that would be great. But I mean, also there's plenty of opportunity for video as well. So I might try and do a bit of a Nico Rosberg style vlog while I'm there. Speaking of which, though, Nico Rosberg's vlog has been a major hit with F1 fans, and he seems to have transitioned very smoothly from being a retired driver with a wife and kids and plenty of, personal responsibilities to effectively being the racing version of Casey Neistat. But is it what racing fans want, and what does it take to be a good content creator in 2019? I mean, let's start with Nico. Sophie, what do you think of his output? Do you like what he's making, and do you watch it?
Occasionally I do watch him. Yeah, I think it's very interesting in terms of more of a behind the scenes look of everything. He's an ex-F1 driver. He knows what he's talking about, and the content he's putting out is simple, but it's good. It's interesting. It draws you in. He's doing a really good job of it.
He is, yeah, and obviously, that's what you get when you're able to put unlimited resources into it in terms of camera work, production staff, and time in the editing suite. But I think we've explored before that it is possible for lower budget content creators to do that. With a relatively low price camera and whatever editing software is on the PC, isn't it?
Yeah, I definitely agree. You can do it on a budget for definite. It's not massively hard to, pick up a camera, film what you're doing, have a little bit of a chat with your audience, and then all you need is just some basic editing software. I mean, even when I used to, put videos out on YouTube and motorsport content and things, I was filming on my phone and then editing on iMovie. So you don't need the big, expensive production value of it all. You really can just do it on a budget. Anyone can pick up a camera and put a video on YouTube. I think it's just making sure that if you're not using that big production team, that you are putting something out that would still be of interest to motorsport fans.
And do you think what would be of interest to motorsport fans has changed over the last few years? I mean, obviously we've seen from the audiences that the big creators have, people are constantly pushing F1 Word and Chainbear for more content, and Mark Priestley to an extent as well. Do you think that the expectations of online fans in terms of the content that's given to them has increased in the last few years?
Oh, definitely. There are no more entitled fans than motorsport fans, and I say that in a good way. I think a few years ago, people were, casually watching, the F1 games a lot. People who would sim and league race and everything like that, and the career modes and things. But I think that's kind of just dropped off as the games have got less popular, and then these videos, like the F1 Word, where it is more commentary style, has become a lot more popular. You can just stick it on in the background and just listen to it. You don't have to put significant time aside to watch it or be that involved in it, but it's also informational more than it is, just silly bit of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And presumably you have your own plans for creating content in the near future. I mean, at the moment you're mostly writing articles, I believe, but do you have plans to get into podcasting yourself or YouTubing yourself?
I did give motorsport YouTubing a go, but at the moment I just don't have the time alongside getting things ready for college and work and writing for Formula E to be able to put 100% effort into making good quality content for YouTube. Yeah,
of course. So what is the future for online content in motorsports? Are we going to see more independents come along, or do you think that having that authority of being a quote unquote proper journalist who goes to the tracks, is it going to still be important in the future?
It's very difficult to say because the content that people enjoy is constantly changing. who knows? Like you said, maybe the proper, the paid accredited journalists will be the ones who possibly take over. But then some people might not want the serious educational, informational videos. They might want to go back to watching, someone do an F1 2019 career mode or something. It completely changes, every month as to what is more popular. But I think the more independent fans who come in, just as purely fans and wind up in, journalist roles will probably start to take over reasonably soon, because I think that is quite a popular thing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, when I started writing about motorsports, which was 100 years ago, I mean, my only goal was to become a journalist for one of the big motor racing magazines, because as far as I was concerned, that was the only way to get involved in writing for an audience about motor racing. But I mean, I almost wish that all this technology was around when I was 17 or 18, because I mean, I can see now that some of the big YouTubers, some of the big fan sites actually have wider audiences than for example, Autosport's videos that they put out, and it's become a really crowded marketplace. Saying that, there is a bit of tension, it seems, between, as I say, the people who consider themselves proper journalists and the kind of fan bloggers and fan writers. We saw that recently with a bit of Twitter to and fro between someone writing for WTF1, which is probably one of the biggest fan-created sites around, and someone who writes for one of the more sort of established blue-chip sites. What do you think is the root of this tension, and is there a way of working together better between journalists and fan sites?
Definitely, that there are so many ways that the two can work together, because in essentially the reason why these big paid journalists working at like autosport.com style publications don't like the fan sites is because they're actually more popular than something like Autosport now, because the quality of journalism from these big sites in past few months has kind of gone downhill a little bit, and it is almost this sort of elitist, well, I get paid to write for this big worldwide known publication and you probably aren't getting paid much, if anything, to write for a fan site created by fans. They see them as like armchair journalists rather than people who are big and respected in motorsport, and they could quite easily work together. It would be so nice to see these big journalists joining the small fan sites, just to bring them up a little bit and get them a little bit more well known, because like I said, the fan sites are so much more accessible and interactive, and they're a lot more fun than these big publications are.
Yeah, and do you think? I mean, why are they more fun? What do you think is the element that the blue chip sites are missing?
Well, they're created by fans for the fans. So when you look at it from a fan perspective, you know what people are wanting out of it, because it's what you want from it. And when you're a fan, you can relate to the fans. Whereas these bigger journalists are not necessarily fans so much as they are just being paid to write about it. So they don't always know or understand what people want to see, which is why Autosport have sort of dropped off a little bit. The same with motorsport.com, because they're not really that interactive with people who are reading their things. You don't feel like a valued part of a community if people aren't interacting with you. That's why people go more towards the fan sites, is because you are interacted with, you feel like a valuable member of something.
Well, yeah, this is it. I know that I pretty much hero worship the guy on here regularly, but if you look at some of the stuff that Chainbear is making, I mean, he's become successful through using his career, which is graphic design and art, and directing that towards F1, which is his personal passion. And what you end up with is a quite graphically heavy, but also really impressive explainer video on various parts of F1 that perhaps the more journalistic sites don't necessarily think to cover. I mean, for example, why is overtaking so hard in F1? Well, it's something that Autosport have covered, but it's much harder to talk it through in a room than it is to actually draw it and show it on a computer, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the problem I have with Autosport's YouTube content, at least, is that it's very serious, very line of stern. There's not much room for opinions in it. It's not, in my opinion, it's not interesting. It's not something that I would go out of my way to watch.
Right. So what do you go out of your way to watch? Which channels are your go-tos?
Generally things like, again, the F1 word, and then F1/FE reviews. For one, because he is working with Formula E, but for two, his content is that commentary style. You can put it on in the background, just listen to it. It's nice to hear opinions more than, always straight facts about things. I enjoy listening to people's opinions on motorsport. Generally, those will be my two go-to channels. Right.
Just looking at, WTF1 fascinates me because it's a site that's never set out to be a straight, serious news site. So it makes it very clear in all of its content. I think we're doing this for fun, and people seem to embrace that. Do you think that the reason that people embrace that is because they're so honest about, look, we're fans, we're like you?
Yeah, I agree there. And as much as I am not the biggest WTF1 fan, they are doing a brilliant job of running what is essentially still a fan site, and probably the biggest motorsport fan site there is.
And I guess my one criticism, which I put on Twitter recently, was that I feel like they've got actually genuinely talented documentary makers doing their videos, people like Matt, but they've clearly got a budget behind them, because for that Hockenheim video they did recently, they were able to borrow an Aston Martin Vantage to drive there. So
yeah.
So they've got the presentation down pat, and they've also got a decent presenter as well. But they could really, I feel like sometimes they put themselves under pressure to still seem like a fan site, and one of the ways they do that is by, ironically, looking like they don't research as much as they actually do. So something like, for example, going to the middle of the woods and saying, yeah, we ignored the tour guide and just decided to go off in our own direction. Now, to me, that's not great journalism, but I can understand that they're not doing it because it is great journalism. So I think that was a moment where maybe WTF1's content was not designed for someone like me. It was designed for maybe a younger viewer.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do not really share their sort of jerky, silly sense of humour, but their demographic is probably set to younger than me. I reckon it's probably maybe 14 to maybe 16 will probably be their biggest demographic. It is made for the younger fans, and you can kind of see that in the sort of sense of humour and the jokes and things, and the sort of people that comment on their videos and things. You can kind of see that their demographic is lower, so obviously they are going to tailor their content to a younger audience.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been a real pleasure chatting about this. And what are your hopes for the rest of the season? Like, do you think we'll see an eighth different winner of the season? And equally, who's going to be champion after all this? Is Jev going to pull it through?
I mean, this is Formula E. Absolutely anything is possible. I think there is definitely the opportunity for another brand new winner. Not that any of us can really predict who it is. That's just the way Formula E is. In terms of the championship, again, it's so close up there. I don't think anyone could predict who it could be. But I think I've started to set my sights on Jev as being a two-time champion.
I mean, it certainly looks like a strong possibility at the moment. If he takes a third win in Berlin, then I can't see any way that they wouldn't give Andre team orders to support him for Bern and the New York doubleheader. I also think that Techeetah has had, along with BMW Andretti, the strongest chassis in most of the races since the start of the season. Now, they've kind of wasted that with a few poor races and with some unlucky decision making, and of course all of those stoppages that have on occasions reduced the race to more of a lottery. But now that we've seen strategy come back into it, now that we've seen powertrains come back into it a bit more, that DS to Cheetah combination with that driver combination does look quite tasty, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. They have got two incredibly strong and experienced drivers. I think they've both done a fantastic job this season, but I still think Jev could just about do it.
Right. Well, we shall see. Also, coming back to what we discussed with Hazel, who do you think are the drivers who are perhaps at risk for season 6? Who really needs to up their game in the last few races?
Definitely Tom Dillman. It's not been brilliant season for him. I kind of feel like he might just end up as a seat warmer for another driver. As much as I am a fan, Danny Laps, he's again a few seasons now. He's been sort of below what is expected, and his dad doesn't own that team anymore. So there's really no way of saying that he will definitely still be there.
Right. Well, I would say. Alexander Sims is a fantastic team player and an intelligent driver, and also someone who, as a person, just from his online presence, I really like. And I very much hope that BMW Andretti will keep him next season, because I think consistency will certainly help that team. But just judging by the noises from the paddock, it does seem like perhaps they might be looking at other drivers. Who do you think are the drivers on the market who would be good for a team like BMW or would be good for a team like Audi if they were looking?
Ooh, see, I haven't ever thought about this.
I mean, do you think do you think someone like Mitch Evans, who's pushed Jaguar above and beyond, you could argue, their performance level, will be looking for a move next season?
Honestly, he could be, especially after his first race win. I think that will have bumped him up the driver market a little bit more. But I think he could possibly be a good fit for BMW. Right,
and of course there's been rumours of him joining up with his managerial partner and old buddy Mark Webber at Porsche as well, which now that Brendan Hartley's joined Toyota for the WEC Super Season next season, looks like a bigger prospect than it was, but we shall have to see. Anyway, Sophie, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much, and let's talk again maybe after Berlin.